Welcome to the Wolflands, baby. We are in this hex right here in what we call the Near Deadwood. We're trying to reclaim Castle Weasel. It's a bit of a wargaming style role-playing game, and we're doing this in 1-to-1 time. Every day that passes in the real world, one day passes in the campaign. Now, that's not to say I can only adventure on February the 13th. Au contraire, mon frère, we can kind of look back a couple of days. We can look ahead a couple of days. You still have some flexibility with the time, but when you're playing in a campaign like this, we're playing solo. But if you've got a lot of people involved, using 1-to-1 time helps you, as the referee, adjudicate fairly and reasonably, and it gives everyone this one resource, time, that accrues at the same rate for everyone. Now, in the last episode, I was a little hazy on exactly which day I was going to be dropping the recordings on. It looks like this is going to be a Thursday afternoon regular. So, as I said, it's February the 13th, and on a little personal note, that means tomorrow is Valentine's Day, St. Valentine's Day, for those of you that know your history, and that means I can stock up on a year's supply of my what do you call that? The branded, my little shtick. The regulars know what I'm talking about. You go back and watch like the other 700 episodes I've done, you'll get it. And this year I was smart. I stashed them where the pretty girls I live with a bunch of pretty girls, and they can't steal them. So as I said, last week was February 6th. We ran into some ogres. Our boys trying to save Castle Weasel did, I should say. I didn't, but the characters did. And we got to talk about that. That's the first thing I want to talk about. And probably the last thing as well, because there's a lot going on there that we really got to think about. I don't know that we're going to get a lot done, like campaign-wise, but that's okay. You don't have to do something every week. So here is the center of the Near Deadwood. And we call it that because the woods are dead and it's nearest to civilization. The little star here is the castle we're trying to reclaim. It looks like this. As of the 13th, we still have not yet completed our palisade. Remember, that palisade will be done. We got the ditch done. So we have now successfully dug a ditch. We've got some rocks. We've got the palisade, little palisades here with probably a little rampart behind it. That will be completed on the 18th. And then on the 25th, our security gate will be completed as well. I'm assuming as we dig the material out, we're dragging some of it over here. We're starting to fill in these low patches. Just a little shout out here. I know I said I was going to do the ogres first. What can I tell you? All's fair in love and war. Happy St. Valentine's Day. So one of the things to be aware of is that as I film these, people are throwing a lot of suggestions at me. I can't get to all of them. I appreciate them all. But one of the suggestions we're going to include, this here is called, I thought I wrote it down here. Yeah, St. John's Well. We probably filled in this little deep spot. We need to build some stables for our horses. We're probably going to wind up with some outbuildings here. Probably along here is a good place, but we're not quite there yet. Our carpenters we got to shore this up. If the ogres come back, we're toast. So we're getting our defenses ready to go. And this becomes St. John's Well. In addition to that little name, kind of memorializing, salute, one of the dear sainted mothers of one of our listeners. I also, going back to this page here, so I've colored in, you can't quite see it very good here. I used light brown for all the broken areas that we have explored. I added some additional broken ground hexes. They're all broken. I just didn't put in all of them. But we have a couple of things. So A here is where the ogres live, the red 8. Although there's not 8 of them anymore, there's 6 because we did manage to kill 2 of them as we drove them off. They know where we are. We know where they are. We've got a little bit of a détente until we decide how we as the players are going to deal with those ogres. But I will point out that we've got a name for the town. It is called Swearingen. See, I wrote that down here. So this is called Watery Tart Pond. This is the Swearingen Ruin, and then there's a gem bridge that gets you over this little stream here. This little stream comes pouring out of it's probably trickling out of the swamps to the northeast of Castle Weasel, kind of hooks around it and then comes back down to Watery Tart Pond before flowing down here until it hits Long Lake, which is located, as I showed you on the regional map, right down here. That's a Long Lake right there. And of course, across Long Lake is the nearest outpost of civilization, at least until recently. At least until we made Castle Weasel, the ruins of Castle Weasel, the latest outpost. So thank you, everyone. Somebody pointed out, hey, you might want to put a postern gate. There is one right down here. There's a little postern gate there. So in addition to the 2 main gates, which are down, we've got some logs, with the big like crosshatch. Like if I had toothpicks, it looks like this. We drive some stakes through it, so you can kind of drag those in and out. I'm assuming we have a few draft horses and a few work horses. I should say also, I assume that we're cutting these logs down from the nearest forest, which it looks like the nearest forest is over the stream. We probably had to spend a little bit of time patching up the bridge. Maybe there's a ford there that they bridged, and that's how we're crossing the stream for now. But it looks like from here we have our choice. I may pick one of these hexes, and at a certain point we'll decide that we've completely logged that stretch of the forest down, and that will buy us a little bit more space to reclaim the ruins. We may want to bring the village across the stream to within 100 yards. Remember, these are 200-yard hexes. Leave it 100 yards, maybe a little bit more than that. This is probably a defensive structure, but eventually, ideally, we will build ourselves a nice big city that the stream will flow through, and we'll have to bridge that, right? This is probably the direction, or maybe we want to just pack up the ruins and bring them down over here and put them on this little pond, right? That might be something we could think about later as well. We'll use the ruined village as raw material. This is a time-honored tradition in the history of the real world. I don't see any reason why you wouldn't do that in your fantasy world as well. These ruined buildings have a lot of square cut blocks. It'll save you a lot of time from having to go find a quarry and make your own. We can use those for the new village that we are intending to construct. Very similar to how we're using the ruined wall to rebuild this wall and kind of shore that up in time. I think it's going to take a while. If we're done with this by the end of the summer, cross your fingers. That's what we're reaching for. Now, as I said, we got to talk about what happened last time for a little while, because I've done some thinking about it. So we got these ogres, and I'm not entirely happy with the way that we ran that combat. I used 1 to 8. You're comparing hit dice. If I had it to do over again, I would probably say, look, I got 32 hit dice of ogres. Okay, I'm going to drop down 3 ogre miniatures on the table. I got 30 hit dice worth of people. That's going to be, right, so 30 every 10 is 1. So it's 3 ogres, 3 people. You're going to get toasted if that's the case. You're going to get just absolutely slammed. Somebody said, hey, why didn't you bring your horses in? And part of the problem is I've only got 20 of these medium cavalry, and 10 of those are on constant patrol duty. Remember that we have to send our wagons back to town. It's a week back to town to Harrington, and then a week back to Castle Weasel. So every 2 weeks, we get a little shot in the arm. We get a little injection, and it turns out we sent a messenger back so we can replace our losses from that battle. That's going to cost us some money. Now, I didn't use the horses, as I said, because I don't have them to spare. I've only got 10 of them left in the castle, and I'm going to use those for chase. As in history, cavalry is used for chasing down a broken enemy. Their backs are turned. They're running really quick. You can make short work of them. They're not going to make short work of 6 ogres. We may bring them along for show if we decide to go clear those ogres out, but I don't even know if we need to do that just yet. First of all, I want to replace my losses. You will recall that we wound up losing a full stand, in miniature terms, or 10 heavy foot. So in order to replace those, I gotta look at my finances here, right? And that's what's going on here in the heavy foot. I actually lost 20 of them. And the way we're going to do this, at least for now, I may do this differently in the future, but for every guy that you lose, for every 2 guys that you lose, 1 is really dead. 1 is wounded and he'll return in a week. You could probably split this up and say, look, a third of them are lightly injured, and although they fell in battle, patch them up, they're back into service in a day or 2. A third are usually dead, and a third take a full week to recover. Remember, these guys have D6 plus 1. That would be up to 7 hit points. So in a week, we're going to get the injured guys back. And that's kind of how I've done this, okay? That means I got to replace my 10 dead. And actually, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to go ahead, and I wrote it down here. Did I write it down? I'm going to go ahead. Where is it? I have some more notes here. I'm going to beef up my numbers a little bit. It's painfully obvious that, as people indicated, I don't have enough guys. I need some more bros. So I sent back to Harrington, and I said, look, I need to have at least 5 heavy foot. Because if I get into any more fights in this map over here, I gotta outnumber them. I gotta at least have enough guys to hold on to Castle Weasel and withstand that like 2-week siege. Boy, there's a scenario in there, isn't there, guys? If we get bottled up in Castle Weasel and we're waiting for reinforcements, that could happen. But again, I'm getting a little ahead of myself. So what I'm going to do here is effective on the 25th. It's not this episode. It's not next episode. It's the following episode. Right now, as I sit in the ruins, I've only got 10 heavy foot to protect me. And those guys are badly injured for this week. So when I get 50 of these guys, then we're all set. And this 50, by the way, sets me back a fairly pretty penny. Remember that for every one of these guys that you recruit, every 10, I should say, plus a sergeant, it's going to cost, this is for 2 of them. It's going to, and I don't know why I did 2. I think that was my initial. But for every 10 of them, it's going to set you back 1,050 gold, plus another 140 a month for salary for the sergeant. Now, I'm not going to get any more lieutenants until I've maxed out my current roster. And by then, maybe some of these lieutenants will have leveled up, so that'll give me another 10 guys that I can extend beyond the 50 who can be, or the 100 that my captain, Captain, what's his name? Captain, let's see, it's Roger Hammer, and it's Captain Von Trapp. That's what it is. Right? We're going with the whole musical, whole show tunes theme here. Just as a way to kind of push back at the jocks. We're going to try to do, and this may seem weird here in the middle of the 2020s, we're going to try to put together a jock theater kid alliance, because oddly enough, in my like real gaming world, that's like the alliance I see. It's very bizarre. It's not the jock nerd, it's the jock. And maybe here in the game, if we can build some bridges and mend those jock theater kid like fault lines, maybe we can see that same thing happen in the real world. We can get the theater kids on board, and we can just, knock off all of the silliness that they've been responsible for the last 20 years. Maybe they could just be normal when they're not up on stage prancing around. And remember, I say that as a guy who was in show choir with all the love in my heart. Theater kids, fix your stuff. Anyway, we're talking about Dungeons and Dragons. And so now I really do want to talk about those ogres, because there is so much to talk about with those guys. And it starts right here in the monster manual. We draw your attention here. Percent in lair. What does that mean? Well, for our purposes, it means we ran into some. We got to balance this out with another passage. I'm not going to crack open the old DMG, the OG DMG, and show you where it says our monsters in the hex will stay in the hex unless and until in the hex will stay in the hex unless or until driven off. So it's 800 yards. We got a good line at them. They can see us. They know what we're up to. This is going to be a problem. I really want to deal with these guys. Probably going to have to wait till the 25th. So in the meantime, I need to figure out a couple of things. Is this their real lair? Because if it is, then the guys that we ran into, well, first of all, how many are appearing? 2 to 20. Yeah, that's what we rolled, all right. If it's their lair, the 8 that we encountered are not the only guys there. You can read the rest of this description, and it says if they're found in their lair, there could be 2 to 12 lady ogres who fight as normal ogres but do less damage and take 6 hit points per hit die. So what would that be? A maximum of 6? I mean, I would basically treat them as they attack as 4 hit die creatures, but we may call them 3 hit dice for the purposes of taking one on their lumpy chins. There will also be 2 to 8 young who fight as Gerbilins. Okay, so there's a 20% chance that that's the case, and so I gotta roll my percentile dice. I'm just gonna roll them in the cup, put my hand down, and 63. So they're not in their lair; they're in a little campsite. Now that's gonna be a real problem for us. That's really disappointing. Because if you take a look at the other important thing, the individuals have treasure type M times 10. Okay, wait a minute. QBS. Oh, Q 10, Q, and B, and then S in lair. Now, the way I read this, and correct me if I'm wrong, it's QBS in lair. Like, where does Q and where does B go? That's a really important question, because it's going to drive the action in our solo campaign. One of the things I haven't heard anybody talk about, we've been talking about this over on the social medias. No slight to anyone here for missing this, but when you're playing a solo campaign like this, and I've got my little war chest of 50,000 gold pieces, which is now Oh, by the way, just 18,900 at Harrington. This is after I recruited the other 40 heavy footmen. And equipped them. Somebody said, "Hey, you could just loot the bodies." You're right. I got a couple of weapon makers. They're banging on their ting 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 on their little hammers. But I went ahead and just spent the full amount right now. Maybe as we get more losses, maybe there's like a cultural thing that, bro, that is Nameless Bob's sword. Or wait, do they have swords? Yeah, they have swords and spears and short swords. You bury it with him, right? You lay it like a cross over his chest. Maybe that's what's going on there. I'm not too worried about it. But the point is that after rolling the dice, now we know that there's just the 6 ogres left. Right? That's good news because it means there's not as many of them, but it also means there's a lot less loot. And the problem I have is I gotta start making some money. I'm bleeding out here, man. I'm gonna go bankrupt, and I don't want to do that. So the only way to get money is this is a zero sum game. I mean, not the typical RPG isn't, but my little hex clearing definitely is. The only source of money, there's two. I can get people to move in, or I can beat up the locals and take it from them. As I colonize this little each of these large hexes is 1 mile, by the way. So 1, 2, 3 hexes across. This little 3-mile circle, I need to ensure that whatever my losses are, that I'm not losing money on that, or at least I'm losing it slow enough that I can get some peasants to come in and I can start beating up the peasants and taxing them, right? That's not gonna go good for me. QBS, so M times 10. So what we can expect, and this is what I'm looking at just from like a pure business perspective, is if we look at treasure type M, they're gonna have 2 to 8 pieces of gold per individual. And that's not thousands, man. That's 2 to 8 GP. That seems a little light for these wandering ogres who have probably set up camp and are watching, looking for an opportunity to hit the castle, if you know what I'm saying. So we're gonna figure out if they do that, and maybe we'll roll some dice here to do that later in the episode. But for now, this is why I'm starting to think. Okay, Q says they may have some gems. Oh, like a 50% chance. I'm not gonna roll this until I beat up the last of them. If I can drive the last one off, then I can loot their camp and take some of this treasure. But I don't know if it's there until I search it. I can't search it until I get rid of the ogres, right? So that's Q. And then B is up here. And that's, there's a good chance of several thousands and thousands and thousands. And ooh, magic, sword, armor, miscellaneous. And then S down here is QBS is 2 to 8 potions. But I kind of think QBS... I think QB and S are in the layer. So the best I can come up with is 2 to 8 gold pieces. That's not even going to replace my boy's sword. Call it an average of 5 each. That's 40 gold pieces, man. What am I supposed to do with that? That's nothing. That's a drop in the bucket. So you may decide, and I don't think there's a whole lot of solid guidance here in the OGDMG. So you may need to come to a different answer for this. But for my sake, because I got these guys until the end of February, March, like to the end of April, we got a lot of episodes to go through before we get to that point. I think we go ahead and just call it 2 to 8 pieces per individual. If I'm wrong, I got next week. I can always go back and retcon. Very similar to how I kind of retconned the loss of my heavy foot today. I went home and I thought about it. I said, you know what, you're right. Let's just fix that. Let's get it right. And again, so this is kind of my financial spreadsheet, right? So this is, if Alon's brain trust comes after me, I'll be able to show him, look, man, I spent 5,800 to recruit 40 more heavy foot. That's where some of that money went. And I took that out of Harrington. So I do still have a lot of gold in the castle. And that may be why those ogres are hanging around. Because they can like old Klondike, what's that guy's name? Klondike Pete from the old Rankin Bass cartoons. They can smell gold and then there are ruins. Hey, my adventurers can do it. And, oh, by the way, that reminds me of one other thing that I needed to address. A number of commenters have very wisely and, very intelligently, they said, hey, look, you shouldn't be sending your nameless mooks 2 to 7 hit points. What are they going up against ogres for? Couple of answers. First of all, fun. Second of all, I got to get them blooded, right? These guys aren't green anymore. They've seen the Ogrefant. up close and personal. So, they're getting some experience. And when we encounter some orcs, they're not going to be intimidated. They're not going to be phased. They're going to be like, who are these midgets? So why not just recruit some adventuring parties? And that's a great question, right? Because that's what a normal patron would do. We've all done that. Hey guys, I got some ogres. You go kill the ogres. You can keep half the stuff they stole from me. And then your players go kill the ogres, and then they run out of dodge, and they're never seen again. Because why would I share it with this patron? Give me a break. Unless there's a very good reason, right? Maybe he's your dad or your uncle, or maybe it's the only safe place to sleep for 50 miles around. That's kind of what we're going with. That might be why the pilgrims like us so much. But the real answer to that question is, why don't I just recruit them? I suppose I could, but my intention, I probably should have mentioned this a long time ago, is to, if you'll observe here, where's my random, the chart for where we're at? Here we are. We're in Scrubland, and so unfortunately, Gary didn't know that we were doing this video 50 years in the future. He might have been a little more accommodating. There's a thing here. There's an entry on. Wait, I thought there was. I think maybe there's not. I thought there was Pilgrim, Nomad, and Urban. I thought there was an entry on here for NPC party. Oh, I could be wrong. Got it. I'm not rolling on temperate and subtemperate inhabited. That's why I'm not seeing the characters. I should be checking on the uninhabited / wilderness, which means, and let's just run the numbers here real quick. There's an entry here for men. Now it does say rough. I should really be rolling on the rough category, because footnote includes within 5 miles of ruins. Well, Castle Weasel's a ruin, so it counts. We got a 10% chance of any encounter being men, and then you have to roll on the man table. And the man table, in addition to sounding suspiciously like the name of a gay bar, it was over here on rough. You've got a 10% chance of rolling characters. So, man, that's only a 1 in 100 chance, but that's what I was looking for. Remember, characters are OP, and I say OP, but we can limit that by putting a probability on the fact that we ever see them after they loot out a lair. So for my game, for what I'm going to do is I'm just going to roll, because I'm exploring as we go. I don't have any real ideas for how this is going to run. I'm going to wait until I roll character on this one. And like I said, I was rolling on the wrong table. I was rolling on, I think I was rolling on inhabited or patrolled. And even if I wasn't, because men don't, I definitely was. I need to be rolling on rough, uninhabited, because we are, like I said, a 30-mile journey by foot. Granted, it's only about 8 miles as the crow flies, but getting around Long Lake means it's a lot longer than that. So that's really the trick is, if I want to encounter an NPC party and turn them loose, it looks like it's about a 1 in 100 chance. I'm gonna have to wait for that to come up on my random tables. Now, as I said, the other question we have to answer is, we got fires burning every night. We got good smells. We have some chances of encounters. Now that I have the trench dug, and I've got I'll have a couple of guards here. I'll have a couple of guards. There's somebody up in the, my sharp-eyed, my younger guys will be up in the OSHA compliant towers on the roofs there, keeping an eye on things, looking to see what kind of random encounters we have, and we're just going to button up. So for what it's worth, what I'm going to do when I'm not actively engaged, and until I have some proper threats around here, I'm just going to low key. I'm not going to worry about it, right? And there's no real firm guidance in here, as we've talked about in previous episodes, for, hey, if you're just chilling in your crib, you're not going to have any random encounters. If you're not actively engaged in seeking out adventure, it's probably not going to find you. This doesn't apply in group games, because if you're not actively engaged in seeking out an adventure, there's always at least one player at the table who is doing that. Even if we only call that player the DM, and that's going to be a real problem, because he's got a lot of pull when it comes to throwing adventure at you guys. So ultimately, where does that leave us? Well, we're all caught up. Let me check my notes one more time. Sometimes I do show prep, and it works really well. So that's kind of it, right? We got more heavy foot coming. They'll be available 4 days from now. And so until then, I just have, I think the other reason I feel comfortable with that is that if you look at who we have available, we still have our 20 Lightfoot. They're still kind of patrolling and guarding our woodsmen. We still have 20 archers in the towers. And I think this is why we decided the ogres weren't going to approach the castle weasel itself, because we're just going to rain arrows down on them. And we'll get at least, I want to say like 5 or 6 shots off. And then we do still have the 10 medium horse kind of patrolling and riding around and identifying threats. So I think we're buttoned up pretty tight, pretty safe. If you think I'm being pretty cheap on that one, I think maybe the one thing we could say is, look, I'm going to be out there for 7 days. Okay, so maybe we give it a 7% chance that there's an encounter during this upcoming week. And next week, when I've got a little bit more gumption, where we're a little bit safer and I got my 10 boys back, maybe then we'll do a little bit more scouting in the near environs. As I said, we could probably, I don't want to like stir any trouble up down here where our guys are doing the woodsman thing, but maybe we send somebody over here looking for a flank to move, as I said in the last episode, at 200 yards, a standard 4x6 table centered on the ogre layer camp. It's not a layer, right? It's a camp. Let me zoom in real tight on that so you can see what I'm talking about. At 200 yards of hex, that table would basically include these 4 hexes like that. So call it the northwestern side of the table, whichever side we declared northwestern, would be impassable swamps, at least from a miniature wargame perspective, right? And then we could drop some broken land down. We could actually game this out. Maybe we do that next week. Maybe we just kind of look ahead a week, get a little ahead of ourselves so that if something weird happens, in the real world, oh boy, has 2025 been chock full of that. We can take a week off and still kind of be up to date with the real world calendar. So that's kind of where we're at. I know not a lot happening now. Did I roll the 39? Did I roll looking for 721? No, so nothing happens this week, and we'll check back in on our boys. Now, why am I rolling at all? Well, because, maybe a dragon comes by. And, you can do these little, the nice thing is you can do these little, like, 15-minute snippets of adventure. You can just get up and every day just roll. So, do I have it? Do I have one? No? Okay, I can get on with my life. If I do, then there's a lot of different things you can do. You can check to see, well, is it a friendly encounter? Because if it's friendly, hey, that's going to take very little time to resolve. We resolved 2 pilgrim encounters, lickety-dang split, right? So a lot of advantages to this style of game. I don't know how we're going to explore the pond. Maybe we decide once we explore all of the hexes around the pond and we roll on the aquatic table for all of these hexes that are immediately adjacent to the pond. But as I said, the brown has been explored, so we got to get into these like rougher areas. Maybe we go down and explore these last few rough hexes by the pond but that's kind of where we're at. So happy St. Val. See, this is how we're doing it now, guys. Happy St. Valentine's Day. The tide has changed. This is how we do things in the world today. Till next time, February 21st. No, it says today's the 13th. February 20th. What am I talking about? It's the 20th. We do the episode on the 20th. Till then, I'm praying for you.